In 2018, a successful tech founder named Marcus got into an argument on Twitter. Someone criticized his product. He responded with facts, data, logic. The critic came back. Marcus responded again, sharper this time. The thread exploded. Marcus kept going. He was right, after all. He had the numbers, the research, the credentials. By the end of the week, Marcus had won every single point in that argument. He had demolished his critic with precision and evidence, and he had lost everything else. His company's stock dropped 12%. His team morale collapsed. Customers left, not because he was wrong, but because he needed to be right. Here's what nobody tells you. The moment you need to win an argument, you've already lost something far more valuable: your power. Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling hollow, even though you said everything perfectly? Have you ever noticed that the people who talk the most seem to command the least respect? There's a reason for that. And once you see it, you can never unsee it. The world has taught you a lie. It told you that silence is weakness, that not defending yourself is surrender, that the person who speaks last speaks loudest. But what if I told you that every word you speak in defense of yourself is a piece of power you're handing to someone else? Today you're going to learn something that will change every interaction you have for the rest of your life. Not because I'm going to give you better arguments, but because I'm going to show you why you never needed them in the first place. This isn't about becoming cold. It's not about being passive. This is about understanding a form of power so subtle, so absolute, that most people will never even see it coming. And by the end of this, you'll know exactly how to wield it. But I need you to understand something first. This knowledge has an edge. It cuts both ways. You can use it to protect yourself, or you can use it to manipulate. The difference is in your intention. So before we go deeper, ask yourself, why do you want this power? Keep that answer close, because we're about to enter dangerous territory. Friedrich Nietzsche, one of the most dangerous minds in philosophy, saw something that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. He saw that human beings are not rational creatures having emotional experiences. We are emotional creatures desperately trying to appear rational. Every argument you've ever had, every debate, every time you felt the burning need to correct someone, it wasn't about truth. It was about something much more primal. It was about the ego's terror of being wrong, of being diminished, of losing its grip on the narrative it's built about itself. Nietzsche introduced the concept of the Übermensch, the individual who has transcended the need for external validation. Not because they don't care about anything, but because they've mastered something most people never even attempt: self-overcoming. The Übermensch doesn't argue because he doesn't need to prove his existence to anyone. His presence is the proof. But here's where it gets interesting. The Stoics, centuries before Nietzsche, understood the same principle from a different angle. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." The Stoics practiced what they called the discipline of assent, the ability to choose your response to any situation, not to react, but to respond. And sometimes, the most powerful response is no response at all. Now, most people hear silence, and they think of three things: submission, avoidance, or awkwardness. But there's a fourth type of silence that changes everything. Let me show you the framework. The three types of silence. Type 1, submission silence. This is the silence of fear. You stay quiet because you're afraid of conflict, of judgment, of losing approval. This silence slowly kills you from the inside. It's the silence of someone who has given up their voice because they believe it has no value. This is the silence you must eliminate from your life. Type 2, avoidance silence. This is the silence of convenience. You stay quiet because engaging isn't worth your time, but it comes from a place of checking out, of not caring. This silence is neutral. It's neither powerful nor weak. It's just absent. Type 3, dominant silence. This is the silence of conscious choice. You stay quiet not because you have nothing to say, but because you've calculated that your silence will say more than your words ever could. This silence is an active force. It's a presence, not an absence. This is the silence that commands rooms. This is the silence that makes people uncomfortable. This is the silence that wins. Here's the truth that will set you free. You don't owe anyone an explanation. You don't owe anyone a defense. You don't owe anyone your energy. The moment you understand this at a cellular level, everything changes. There's a famous story about Steve Jobs in the early 2000s. He was in a board meeting, and one of the board members was going on, criticizing a decision, demanding answers, getting louder and more aggressive. Everyone expected Jobs to fight back. He was known for his intensity, his sharp tongue. But he did something nobody expected. He said nothing. He just looked at the board member, not with anger, not with defensiveness, just looked. The silence stretched for what felt like minutes. The board member kept talking, but his voice started to waver. He began to justify himself, to explain, to fill the void, and the more he talked, the weaker he sounded. Jobs never said a word. He didn't need to. The silence had already won. After the meeting, another board member asked Jobs why he didn't respond. Jobs smiled and said, "Why would I interrupt someone who's destroying their own credibility?" That's the power we're talking about. Not the power to destroy others with words, but the power to let them destroy themselves while you remain unmoved. But here's the critical distinction, and this is where most people get it wrong. Strategic silence is not the same as complicit silence. There are moments when you must speak, when silence would be a betrayal of your values, when it would enable harm, when it would abandon someone who needs your voice. The Übermensch doesn't stay silent out of fear. He chooses his battles with precision. He speaks when his words will create, and he's silent when words would only destroy. This is the ethical framework you need to understand. Silence is not a rule, it's a tool. And like any tool, it can build or it can harm. The question is, what are you building? Right now, if this is resonating with you, if you're starting to see your past interactions in a new light, if you're realizing how much power you've been giving away, I want you to do something. Below, I choose powerful silence, not for me, for you. Because the moment you publicly declare a new way of being, you activate something in your psychology. You make it real. You draw a line between who you were and who you're becoming. Do it now. Then let's go deeper. Let's talk about what happens in someone's brain when you choose not to react. Because this is where it gets fascinating and a little dark. The human brain is wired for prediction. We're constantly running simulations of how interactions will go. When you argue with someone, their brain has already mapped out the likely responses. They know you'll defend yourself. They know you'll justify. They know you'll try to prove them wrong. Their amygdala, the fear center, is activated, but it's a familiar activation. They're in known territory. But when you don't respond, when you just absorb their words and remain still, their prediction software crashes. The brain doesn't know what to do with that. The amygdala goes into overdrive, but now it's not processing a known threat. It's processing the unknown. And the unknown is always more terrifying than the known. Neuroscience shows us that when people don't get the reaction they expect, they experience what's called prediction error. This creates massive cognitive dissonance. Their brain starts generating explanations. They're judging me. They think I'm stupid. They're planning something. They see right through me. Notice what's happening. They're doing your work for you. They're creating their own psychological prison, and you didn't have to say a single word. There's a technique therapists use called strategic silence. When a client says something revealing, instead of jumping in with analysis or comfort, the therapist just waits. The silence becomes a mirror, and in that mirror, the client sees themselves more clearly than any words could show them. They start to hear what they just said. They start to process. They often arrive at insights the therapist never had to articulate. One therapist told me a story. She had a client, a high-powered executive, who came in complaining that everyone at work was incompetent. He went on for 10 minutes about how he was surrounded by idiots, how he had to do everything himself, how nobody understood his vision. When he finished, she said nothing. Just looked at him with calm attention. He waited for her response. Then he shifted in his chair. Then he said, "What? Why aren't you saying anything?" More silence. Then, something cracked. He said, quieter, "You think I'm the problem, don't you?" She still didn't answer. And he sat there, and you could see it happening in real time. He was seeing himself through the mirror of her silence. By the end of the session, he had diagnosed his own issue. She barely said 10 words the entire hour. That's the power of silence as a mirror. It forces people to confront the thing they're running from, themselves. But here's where it gets complicated. Because there are people who will use your silence against you. Manipulators, narcissists, gaslighters. They depend on emotional reactions to maintain control. When you don't react, they escalate. They twist your silence into evidence of your guilt, your weakness, your complicity. So you need to understand the difference between strategic silence and being manipulated into silence. The manipulation test, 3 questions. 1. Am I choosing this silence, or is it being forced on me through fear, guilt, or obligation? If you're staying silent because you're afraid of the consequences of speaking, that's not strategic, that's submission. 2. Is this silence serving my values, or is it betraying them? If your silence allows harm to continue, if it enables someone to hurt you or others, then it's not powerful. It's just cowardice wearing a philosophical mask. 3. Do I feel more powerful or less powerful when I remain silent in this situation? Your body knows the answer. Submission silence feels like a weight. Strategic silence feels like control. If you fail any of these 3 tests, you need to speak. But here's the key. You speak from a place of choice, not reaction. You speak with precision, not emotion. You speak once, clearly, and then you return to silence. You don't defend your statement. You don't justify it. You say what needs to be said, and then you let it stand on its own. Let me give you a real example. A friend of mine, Sarah, worked for a boss who was a classic narcissist. Every meeting, he'd berate the team, blame them for his failures, create drama to maintain control. For months, Sarah stayed silent. She thought she was being professional, rising above it. But she was miserable. Her silence wasn't strategic. It was survival. One day, in front of the whole team, he blamed her for a project failure that was entirely his fault. Everyone knew it. And Sarah, instead of defending herself, instead of arguing, said one sentence, "That's not accurate, and everyone in this room knows it." Then she went silent, didn't elaborate, didn't justify, just let it hang there. The boss tried to escalate. "Are you calling me a liar?" Sarah, silence. "You need to apologize right now." Sarah, silence. He kept going, getting more desperate, more aggressive. And with each attempt, he looked weaker. The team saw it. HR, who happened to be in that meeting, saw it. Sarah said nothing else. She had spoken her truth, and now her silence was making him destroy himself. Within 2 weeks, he was removed from his position. Sarah never said another word about it. That's the difference. Strategic silence isn't about never speaking. It's about speaking with such precision that your words become undeniable, and then letting silence do the rest of the work. Now let's get tactical. You understand the philosophy. You understand the psychology. Now you need the weapons. Here are the 5 tactical applications of strategic silence that you can use immediately. Weapon 1. The absorbing pause. When someone says something designed to provoke you, insult you, or bait you into a reaction, you pause. Not a quick pause, a deliberate one. 3 full seconds. You look at them. You absorb what they said. You let them see that you heard it, considered it, and found it unworthy of a response. This pause does 3 things. It shows you're not rattled. It makes them question whether their attack landed. and it gives you complete control of what happens next. Example: someone at work takes credit for your idea in a meeting. Instead of immediately calling them out, you pause, you look at them. 3 seconds. Everyone notices the pause. The tension builds. Then you simply move the conversation forward as if they hadn't spoken. Later, in private, if it matters, you address it with one clear sentence. But in that moment, your pause spoke volumes. Weapon 2. The reflection loop. Instead of answering a loaded question or accusation, you reflect it back. Not sarcastically, but genuinely. Why do you ask? Or, what makes you say that? Then, silence. Let them explain themselves. Let them reveal their assumptions, their insecurities, their agenda. The more they talk, the more they expose. You're not avoiding the question. You're making them work for the confrontation they're seeking. And most people, when forced to explain their own attack, lose steam. Example: someone says, "Why are you always so quiet?" What, you think you're better than everyone? Instead of defending yourself, you say, "What makes you think that?" Silence. They'll stumble. They'll project. And you'll learn everything you need to know about what's really bothering them. Weapon 3. The withdrawal of presence. This is advanced. When someone is trying to draw you into drama, chaos, or emotional manipulation, you don't argue. You don't defend. You simply become less available. You withdraw your attention, your energy, your presence. Not cruelly, not with explanation, just less. You're busy. You're focused on other things. You're polite, but distant. This drives manipulators insane because they need your engagement to feed on. Your silence here isn't in the moment, it's structural. You're teaching them that certain behaviors result in losing access to you. Example: a family member constantly creates drama to get attention. Instead of being pulled in, you start responding less. You're kind when you are present, but you're present less often. No explanations, no accusations, just natural consequences. Your silence becomes a boundary. Weapon 4. The strategic question. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is ask one devastating question and then go silent. The question hangs in the air. They have to answer it. And the answer often reveals everything. Is that really what you believe? Or, how does that align with what you said last week? Or, what are you trying to achieve right now? Then, silence. Let them sit with it. Let them realize they're about to expose themselves. Example: a colleague is gossiping about someone else to you. Instead of engaging or defending the person, you ask, "Why are you telling me this?" Silence. Watch them squirm. Watch them realize they're revealing more about themselves than about the person they're gossiping about. Weapon 5. The closing statement. When you do speak after a period of strategic silence, you speak once, with finality. No follow-up, no explanation. You make your statement, and then you're done. This is the opposite of arguing. Arguing is back and forth. This is declaration. I don't see it that way. That doesn't work for me. I'm not available for this. Then, nothing. They can respond, they can argue, they can demand justification. You've already moved on. Your silence after your statement makes it absolute. Example: a friend keeps pressuring you to do something you don't want to do. After politely declining multiple times, you say, "I've said no, that's my final answer." They push back. You. Silence. They try to guilt you. You. Silence. Eventually, they learn that your no means no. Not because you argued about it, but because you simply stopped engaging with the debate. But here's what you need to understand. These weapons only work if you've mastered yourself first. If you're using them from a place of ego, of wanting to win, of wanting to punish, they'll backfire. People will sense the manipulation, but if you're using them from a place of genuine self-respect, of protecting your energy, of refusing to participate in pointless conflict, They become natural extensions of who you are. Now, I promised you the ethical framework, because these tools can be used to harm, and I need you to understand when silence is wrong. The 3 times you must speak. 1. When silence enables injustice. If someone is being harmed, diminished, or oppressed, and your silence allows it to continue, you have a moral obligation to speak. Strategic silence is about protecting yourself and choosing your battles, not about being a bystander to harm. 2. When silence betrays your values. If staying silent means compromising what you truly stand for, then silence becomes cowardice. The Übermensch doesn't stay silent out of fear of consequences. If the consequence of speaking is losing something, but the consequence of silence is losing yourself, you speak. 3. When silence damages someone who trusts you. If someone you love or someone who depends on you needs your voice, and you withhold it out of convenience or conflict avoidance, that's betrayal. Strategic silence is never about abandoning people. It's about refusing to engage with people who don't deserve your energy. Let me tell you about a time when silence failed. There was an activist named Marcus, different Marcus from the beginning, who prided himself on staying above the fray. He believed in strategic silence, in not engaging with critics, in remaining unmoved by controversy. When false accusations were made about his organization, he stayed silent. He thought his work would speak for itself. He thought dignifying the accusations with a response would give them power. But he was wrong. His silence in that context was interpreted as guilt. The accusations spread. Good people started to distance themselves. And by the time he realized he needed to speak, the narrative was set. His organization collapsed, not because of the false accusations, but because his silence had allowed them to become truth in the public mind. The lesson? Silence is contextual. It's not a dogma, it's a strategy. And strategies must adapt to terrain. We're at the end. And if you've made it this far, something has shifted in you. You're seeing conversations differently. You're seeing your past interactions with new eyes. Maybe you're cringing at times you over-explained. Maybe you're angry at times you stayed silent when you shouldn't have. That's good. That discomfort is growth trying to happen. Nietzsche's Übermensch wasn't a superhuman. It was a human who had overcome the need to be controlled by external validation. It was someone who had looked into the abyss of their own ego and said, "I see you, and I'm not afraid of you anymore." The power of strategic silence isn't about controlling others. It's about finally, truly, controlling yourself. It's about being the master of your responses instead of the slave to your reactions. It's about understanding that your energy, your words, your presence are the most valuable resources you have, and you don't waste them on people and situations that don't deserve them. Imagine your future self, 6 months from now. You're in a situation that would have triggered you before. Someone says something designed to hurt you, to provoke you, to drag you into chaos. And you don't take the bait. You feel the impulse to defend yourself, to explain, to prove them wrong. But you recognize that impulse for what it is, the ego's fear of being diminished. And you let it pass. You remain still. You look at them with calm awareness, and in that moment you realize something profound. They have no power over you, not because you defeated them in argument, but because you no longer need to. That's the moment everything changes. That's the moment you stop living in reaction to the world and start living in response to it. That's the moment you become dangerous in the best possible way. Dangerous because you cannot be manipulated. Dangerous because you cannot be provoked. Dangerous because your silence says more than their noise ever could. Remember Marcus from the beginning? The tech founder who destroyed himself by needing to be right? I spoke to him 2 years after that incident. He told me that losing everything taught him the most valuable lesson of his life. He said, "I was so busy winning arguments that I forgot to build a life worth living. I was so busy proving I was right that I became someone nobody wanted to be around. The day I learned to be silent was the day I started to actually be heard." The world doesn't need more people who can argue well. It needs more people who know when not to argue at all. It needs people who can stand in the middle of chaos and remain unmoved. It needs people who understand that true power isn't loud. It's quiet. It's certain. It's complete. You are capable of becoming that person. Not by changing who you are, but by removing everything that isn't truly you. All the defensiveness, all the need to be validated, all the fear of being misunderstood. Strip it away. What remains is pure presence. And presence doesn't need to argue. It simply is. So here's my final question for you. What would your life look like if you stopped trying to win arguments and started winning your life back? What would change if you reclaimed all the energy you've spent defending yourself to people who were never going to understand you anyway? The answer to that question is the beginning of everything. The weak shout to be heard. The strong remain silent until their words can change the world. The wise understand that most of the time, silence is the world-changing word. You don't need to convince anyone of your worth. You don't need to defend your truth. You don't need to win arguments. You just need to know who you are, stand in that knowing, and let the noise of the world break against you like waves against stone. That's the power of strategic silence. That's the transformation. That's your new way of being. Welcome to the other side. If this video changed how you see yourself and your power, watch the next one. It will take everything you learned here and show you how to apply it to the one area where silence is most misunderstood: relationships. Click it now.